Hi class, welcome back. Now we are going to have another new lesson, and that is the nervous system part 3. So in our previous lesson, we were able to discuss and define the central nervous system and its division. Now we are going to know more about the brain. Now let's go to the next page. Alright, so before we go to the next part of the session or the next part of the topics, let's define first the limbic system. The limbic system is a set of structures in the brain that deal with emotions and memory. It regulates autonomic or endocrine function in response to emotional stimuli and also is involved in reinforcing behavior. So as you can see here, the limbic system is a structure in the brain and mostly its function focuses only on emotions and memory. So it is regulated by the autonomic or endocrine function. When we say endocrine function, it entails to the endocrine glands, which the endocrine glands is responsible in secreting hormones. And this is in response to emotional stimuli. Alright, so when we say emotional stimuli, when we say first stimuli, it is anything in the environment that enacts us to have a response. Let's have an example. For example, you heard a whistle. And when you heard a whistle, you lean towards where the whistle came from. So that the sound of the whistle is the stimuli. You leaning towards where the whistle came from is your response. So in here, when we say emotional stimuli, we means to say the emotional responses from the environment. Alright, for example, when we saw someone who is very angry, our limbic system will give us a response to that emotion or that anger. So that's why in the limbic system, it also involves in reinforcing behavior. So once we heard or we saw the angry person, our response would be depending on the situation. And our response on that situation, our behavior, that would be the response of our limbic system. So again, the limbic system is the structure in the brain that is responsible in our emotions and memory, and also it regulates by the endocrine function, specifically the endocrine glands that secretes hormones. And this is due to the response of the stimuli or emotional stimuli and enacts us to give a response or a behavioral response. So the limbic system exists only in mammals. When we say mammals, these are the animals that have vertebrates or the vertebrae itself, the spinal column line. So any animals that have a vertebrae or it's a vertebrae have a limbic system. For example, monkey. How about the cockroach? Do they have a limbic system? No, they don't, because they are not mammals. Again, limbic system exists only those vertebrates or animals that have that is a vertebrae. All right, so that is for the limbic system. Limbic system, its regions mediate motivated behaviors, emotional states, and memory processes. So again, like what I've mentioned in the previous slide, the limbic system is responsible to our emotions and memory. Also, it is the region where it mediate rather. When we say mediate, in the middle, the motivated behaviors are our behaviors when we are motivated, our emotional states like happy, sad, or angry, and many more kinds of emotions. And also our memory processes, our long-term, short-term memories. Or rather, yes, recalling memory. Also, the limbic system, it also regulates body temperature, blood pressure, and sugar level, as well as other housekeeping activities. So it regulates our temperature when we are sick, and also our regular temperature, our blood pressure as well. When we say blood pressure, it is the pressure of our blood flowing in our blood veins, or in our veins, and also our sugar level. The limbic system, it consists of the amygdala and the hippocampus. Let's start first with the amygdala. It consists of the amygdala, which plays a role in controlling aggression and emotions. So when we say, or when we can control our aggression like when we are angry, we wanted to slap the person, for example. So the ones controlling our aggression of slapping the person is the amygdala, and also our emotions. So, for example, there's something that came up unexpectedly and that made us very angry. So, to balance our emotions, amygdala plays that role. So, that's the function of the amygdala. Now let's go to the hippocampus. Hippocampus, which plays an important role in the formation of long-term memories. So our memories when we were a child, or our childhood memories, or our memories of our grandparents, or the people around us when we were little, these are formed by the hippocampus. Now, in our previous slide, or in our previous lesson, I've mentioned that some scholars divided the brain into three parts: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. So as you can see, the forebrain is orange in the picture. It is the bigger part. The midbrain is in the middle, and the hindbrain is at the lower part. So again, these are the three parts of the brain according to some scholars. Now let's go to the forebrain, or the other scholars call it the cerebral hemispheres. So the cerebral hemisphere is it is the right and left halves of the cerebrum, which is covered by the cerebral cortex and connected by the corpus callosum. So now let's look at the picture below. So as you can see, the big part there that is a light pink color, I think it's light pink, is what we call the cerebrum. So the cerebrum, it is the front of it is the front. It is the front of the brain that consists of the right and left halves. So it means that it has the right cerebrum. The cerebrum. It has the right and the left part, or the others call it the right hemisphere or the left hemisphere. And the cerebrum is connected by the corpus callosum. So the corpus callosum is the pink part there. So it's under the cerebrum, if you can see that. I think it's color pink or purple. Alright, so it's the purple part there. So there's an arrow there showing the corpus callosum. So again, the corpus callosum, corpus callosum is the one that connects the left and the right part or halves of the cerebrum. Okay, so again, the cerebrum is the bigger part there. All right, so the cerebrum is covered by the cerebral cortex. So it is not in the picture, but the cerebral cortex, it is the outer layer of neural tissue. So it is, if you're going to look at the cerebrum there, the outer part, the most outer part, is like the skin. It's like the skin of the cerebrum is the cerebral cortex. So again, so as you can see there, the cerebral hemisphere is divided into two. I mean, yes, the cerebral hemisphere consists of the cerebrum, which is the big part there, and it's divided into two halves, the right and the left halves, and it's connected by the corpus callosum. And the cerebrum is covered by the cerebral cortex. All right. Now let's talk more about the cerebrum. Cerebrum is the largest structure in the brain and consists of two cerebral hemispheres. Like what I've mentioned a while ago, those cerebral hemispheres are the right and the left hemispheres. So the cerebrum, its outer layer is covered by a gray matter called the cerebral cortex. And beneath the cerebral cortex is an area of white matter composed mostly of myelinated fibers. These are nerve fibers that go to the opposite side of the brain and the spinal cord. Now let's go first to the cerebral cortex. Again, like what I've mentioned a while ago, the cerebral cortex is the one that is covering the cerebrum. And it is a gray matter. It is a gray matter, and that covers it. And there is also a white matter that is composed of or made of myelinated sheets, which is on the next page. So these fibers are called, let's go to the next page, corpus callosum. Again, the corpus callosum are the ones that connects the left and the right hemispheres. All right. Now, the surface of the cerebral hemispheres has numerous folds or convolutions, or also known as gyri. Between the gyri is a canal or groove called sulcus or fissure. Now, if you're going to look at the picture, the sulcus there are the small canals of the brain. The gyrus, these are the folds in the brain, the bumps in the brain. Okay, so and then the fissures is the one at the middle. So in the picture it's longitudinal fissure, but it can also called fissure or sulcus as well. But in there it's called longitudinal fissure because it's long. As you can see, it's actually almost dividing the two hemispheres of the brain. All right. So again, the sulcus are the canal or the grooves of the brain. Yes, that's the sulcus, and the folds made by the sulcus is called the gyri, or the gyrus if it's many. And the fissures are also known as sulcus can also be longitudinal. That's why we can also have the longitudinal fissure. Now let's talk about again on the hemispheres of the brain. But now let's talk more about it in depth. So like what I've mentioned, there are two hemispheres of the brain. That is the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. Now let's go to the left hemisphere first. The left cerebral hemisphere is usually larger than the right hemisphere and considered as the dominant hemisphere, containing numerous short interconnecting fibers. So the left cerebral hemisphere or the left hemisphere is also known as the dominant hemisphere, while the right hemisphere, which is a non-dominant hemisphere, contains various long neural fibers which form synaptic connections in widely separate areas of the brain. So we have the left hemisphere, which is the dominant, and the right hemisphere, which is the non-dominant. The difference between the two is that the left hemisphere consists of short interconnecting fibers, while the right hemisphere consists of long neural fibers. Most frequently, individuals use the dominant hemispheres containing speech center and sometimes referred to as the major hemisphere. Again, the dominant hemisphere is the left hemisphere. So that's why most individuals are right-handed, while if the individual is left-handed, uses the right hemisphere, he uses the left hand. Let's continue. People who are right-handed have their left cerebral hemisphere as the major hemisphere. However, majority of the left-handed individuals have their language or speech ability usually represented in both hemispheres. So let's talk more about that. But in here, again, an individual who is right-handed uses the left hemisphere. And then an individual who is left-handed, its dominant hemisphere is the right hemisphere. But a left-handed individual uses its language or speech ability by both hemispheres. Now let's talk more about that. Let's go to the next page. The motor speech center of, or the Broca's area, which is considered with the production of speech, is located in the left hemisphere only. So that's why when a person who is a left-handed, who uses the right hemisphere, uses both, because the motor speech or the Broca's area is located at the left hemisphere. Alright, again, the Broca's area or the motor speech, the ones that is responsible in producing our speech, is located at the left hemisphere only. Now, the area which is involved with comprehension of language and in the ability of the individual to write and understand written words can also be found in the left hemisphere. This is the Wernicke's area. So the Wernicke's area is now responsible to the comprehension of language that includes by writing and understanding words. And it is also located in the left hemisphere. So the difference between the Broca's area and the Wernicke's area is that the Broca's area is responsible to the motor speech and the Wernicke's area is responsible to the understanding and writing language, specifically words, written words. So like what I've mentioned, when a person is a left-handed, and the dominant hemisphere he or she has would be the right hemisphere. But in speech and in comprehension, that person utilizes both hemispheres. Now, speaking to hemispheres, each hemisphere consists of different functions. Now, let's look at the picture. We have the left and right brain functions. We have the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. Let's go first to the left brain functions or the left hemisphere. So first, it is known for the function of analytical thought, logic, language, science, and math. So that's why some individuals who are right-handed tends to be good in science or in mathematics, or sometimes they are good in both. Now let's go to the right brain functions or the functions of the right hemisphere. So they have the holistic thought, meaning very whole. They have intuition. They are very creative. They're artistic. Artistic, and some of them are musicians as well. So sometimes a left-handed person can be very good in drawings, or they are very talented in different ways because they have the right hemisphere, which is considered, which specializes in creativity and in arts. Now let's go to the lobes of the brain. Actually, there are only 4 lobes of the brain, but I've also included the 2 parts, like the cerebellum and the brainstem, so you can picture the arrangement of the brain in here. So there are 4 lobes of the brain. The first is the frontal lobe. Next, we have the parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. And below the temporal and the occipital lobe, we can find the cerebellum and the brainstem. Now let's go to the next page. Okay, so now let's go in depth of the functions of the lobes and the cerebellum and the brainstem. Let's go first to the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is responsible for the emotional control, self-awareness, motivation, judgment, problem solving, talking, movement, and initiation. Alright, so the frontal lobe is responsible of the following. Now let's move to the parietal lobe. The parietal lobe is the color red in the picture. The parietal lobe is responsible for the sense of touch, awareness of spatial relationships, and academic functions such as reading. Next, we have the occipital lobe, which is responsible for the vision. And then we have the temporal lobe, which is responsible for the memory, hearing, understanding language, and processing information. The cerebellum, on the other hand, is responsible for the balance, coordination, skilled motor activity. And the brainstem is responsible for breathing, heart rate, arousal and consciousness, sleep and wake cycles. So that is the functions of the 4 lobes, including the cerebellum and the brainstem. So that's it. So that's the end, or the last slide for this lesson. We have another presentation for this one. So if you have any questions about this presentation, please let me know. We have our own group chat in Messenger, in FB Messenger. So please let me know, and I'm glad to answer your questions. So that's it for now. See you on our next, talk to you in our next video. Bye for now.